video, we're going to take a look at customer deposits or customer prepayments. So you could do this with either merchandise or services, I suppose, but it's more common if you're doing some kind of a job for a customer or providing some kind of service that on some jobs anyway, you're going to ask for a deposit up front. So in QuickBooks, there's a couple of ways to do that. We're going to look at the simple way first. Let's say that Christy Abercrombie here is my customer. If you're not familiar with this, you see these indented entries here. Those are jobs. The sample file in QuickBooks is a contractor, and so one customer can have multiple jobs. But we're just going to deal with the customer level here, so we're going to say we're doing something for Christy, and we want a $500 deposit before we start. So I'm going to receive payments. And this is actually the same as I would do if I were receiving payment from any customer at any time. The difference is that down here you see there are no open invoices for this payment to be applied to. But that's all right. I'm going to fill it out just the same, procedures just the same as any other payment, save and close. No, I don't want to print a credit memo. I just want to record that payment. And there it is. You can see that now Christy Abercrombie has a negative $500 as a balance on her account. If I were to look at a accounts receivable report like open invoices, there's the $500 invoice right there. Okay. Now, that's actually the complete procedure. The first time you create an invoice for Christy, you can apply the $500 payment that's already sitting there to the invoice, and that will reduce that invoice by the $500. It'll give her the credit just like she'd made the payment after the invoice. Now, sometimes there are those that need a more sophisticated way to do this. They want to send an invoice to the customer for the deposit. They want to show the $500 as a deposit on their financial reports. They want to show the credit for the $500 deposit when they create the invoice for the customer. So all these things would make the second method more useful to that person. So there are a few more steps to this method. Let's go through those. It's not complicated. It's just more steps, basically. So if I want to show it on my financial reports, I have to have an account to post to. Now, I've already created that in the account. So let's take a look at it. On my chart of accounts, it's going to be a liability. And there it is, customer deposit. It's a liability because I haven't done anything to earn that money yet. Under the right circumstances, I may need to refund that money. So it's not really mine. So it becomes a liability on my books. Oops. Let's take a quick look on how this was set up. Other current liability, customer deposit. That's really all you need right there. You have the right type and the name that you want, your account's good. So we've got that. The other thing we're going to need is if we're going to put this on an invoice, we have to have an item, right? So on the item list, I created customer deposit right here. Now I created that as an other charge type item. If you were to use a service type item, non-inventory part, those are generally going to work just the same for you. So my choice was other charge, but if you used one of those others, you'd be okay. Here's my name for the item, customer deposit. I have the description, however you would like to word that, however you would like that to show on invoices. Fill that in here. I didn't put an amount because it's going to be different every time. It's definitely not taxable. Sales tax not going to be due on a customer deposit, right? So I left that at non-taxable. And then really the important part, or the most important part, perhaps I should say, is the account that I choose. And I chose that customer deposit, that liability account that we were just looking at a moment ago. That is critical. You do want that to be correct. All right, so I have my account, I have my item. Let's walk through the procedure. So I will create an invoice for my customer, Christy, and I'll come down here to the item I'm selling her. That's going to be the customer deposit. It's going to be $500, and there you see it's not taxable. $500 invoice, that's the total. We are good to go. I'll click Save and Close, and then I can mail that to her or email that to her. However I usually get invoices to my customers, it's ready to go just like any other invoice would be. Now, when the time comes that I create my first invoice for the work that we're doing for Christy, I want to show that she got credit for that $500, because if it doesn't show that on the invoice, she's liable to call and make us explain that to her. So let's just head that off right in the beginning and make sure it shows on the invoice. So let's say that she has paid this $500 invoice, because we probably wouldn't start. It doesn't do any good to invoice her for the deposit and then start work unless she's paid, right? So we're going to assume that she has paid. And I'm going to, you know what, before I do that, hold on just one moment. Let's take a quick look at a financial report. Let's look at a balance sheet. And if I scroll down here, I just want you to see this, that here's my customer deposit, $500. So that liability of $500 is showing on the balance sheet. It also shows on accounts receivable reports. So here's an open invoices report, and there's the open $500 for Christy. Okay. Just to give you that full picture there. So let's now create another invoice. We've done some work for Christy, and I'm just going to do a simple invoice here for labor. Let's say we did 50 hours at $50 an hour, and that gives her an invoice of $2,500, right? Well, I'm going to skip a line just for clarity, and I'm going to use that customer deposit item and make sure that shows. And then I'm going to use a negative, and I'm going to use that minus sign. I'm going to put a negative $500 on there, showing Christy that she is getting credit for that $500 deposit that she made. And you can see the total of the invoice is now $2,000, right? So if I save this, if I go back to my financial report, so balance sheet, I don't think customer deposit will even show on here because there's no, right, because it's not even, it's just going to be a zero amount. The $500 went in and then it came out. Let me do something else here for you. Let's go to the chart of accounts, liabilities, customer deposit. Let's do a quick report. And there you can see invoice for the deposit, the $500 going into that account, and then giving her credit for that deposit is the $500 coming out of the account. So actually that gives you a really good accounting answer to showing that deposit on accounting reports if you need that. It also gives you a good way to show that on the customer forms, the invoice form, if there were a statement produced during that time period or whatever, it would show there as well, to give more transparency to the customer if you feel you need that. Now, if you don't really need those things, if you can get by with the simpler option, then just receive a payment for the $500, and that's going to work fine. You're going to accomplish everything you need with that. unless, like I say, you need that transparency to the customer or you need that on your financial report. So I hope that was clear and you understood all of that. If you have any questions, just leave those in the comments and I will get to those. Thanks.